It's another week, and obviously the Astra's in bits again. No luck with this thing. I drove it once after getting it back from the head rebuild, and I don't know if you can see in there, but so yeah, that's not good. The coolant bottle's empty, and when it did have stuff in it, it was full of foam and oil. It was white, it was clear. The oil cap looks fine. The oil level is a bit low though, which is concerning. I'm not sure if it's the head gasket. I don't think so. What I want to hope is, let me show you where all the coolant went first, I guess. So, I've already started stripping the car. It's been a couple of weeks since I drove it. I was just waiting for a new water pump to come from Germany, because if you can see here, the seal for the water pump bearing has gone. Coolant residue on everything is not great. This was pretty clean, relatively. I mean, it was clean when I got it back from Giz. They did a great job of tidying the whole thing up. The new springs they fitted. What I'm hoping the case is that the brand new oil cooler from Nevlock has started mixing oil and coolant, and that's where the foam came from. Or it could be, as Ash suggested, the grease from the water pump bearing that's failed. I don't think there would be that much grease in a water pump bearing, to be honest. The bottle was coated with the stuff, and it was bubbling, like there was pressure in it, foaming the oil up. So that to me screams more like an actual oil leak in the engine. Plus the oil level is low right now, but it is on the ramp tilted backwards slightly because my drive's not flat, so I don't know what to think. Let me just cut in here from a few weeks in the future when I'm a little less annoyed at the car. If you're wondering why I don't sound too energetic in the video, that is the voice of someone that's just spent 4 figures on a head rebuild and a bunch of issues left by the previous people that worked on the car being fixed, after spending 4 figures on a forged engine 6 months prior, driving their car once and it dropping all of its coolant, either having a failed head gasket or failed oil cooler on their birthday. So that's what that is. But anyway, back to the video. My plan today was to turn it over, get it to top dead center, lock the timing, fit a new water pump, obviously put the belts back on, and go from there. The worry is if I don't bypass the factory cooler on this double banjo and just put it back to a single banjo with the aftermarket one, and the oil cooler is the problem, it's not just the water pump bearing, then that could just fill the system with oil again. I'm going to waste coolant and a coolant flush and potentially cause more problems as well, because if the pressure from the oil pressure has blown the water pump seal out, that could just happen again with the new pump, and I'm 40 quid down with no working car. So what I was going to do is put the single banjo back in with just the front oil cooler, the blue takeoff there with the black lines, and bypass the rear one. Problem there is if it is just grease from the water pump bearing, I am basically just binning 130 quid's worth of oil cooler and lines for no reason. But anyway, I'm gonna spin it over, get the timing marks lined up at the top, lock the timing gears, and then get the water pump changed and go from there, I guess. That water pump is seized in there. That sucks. Look at that. Right, so I think that is the old Z20 timed up. If we look underneath, the torch shined on to make it a bit easy to see. Crank timing mark. So I've just got to turn it over a couple of times now and make sure everything still lines up. And then we're good to start doing some coolant flushes. That's it. All I can do now is leave it to run with the coolant bottle open, try and get it bled. Hope it doesn't start bubbling. Right, 25 minutes gone by. Neighbours must hate me. Coolant is looking gross, but as expected. Again, don't know if you can see that. No leaks, bone dry everywhere, so we're all good. So I'm gonna not film the next bit, but I will let it cool down, do a second coolant flush, and get it back on the road, hopefully. Well, we'll see if the frothing comes back. Right, so hopefully that's it now. Coolant flushed everything back together, hopefully for the last time for a while. It's not getting worse. As you could see, nothing really floating on top, which is better than the last time I showed you. And there's no new oil coming up out of the system. So hopefully it was just bearing grease, which would be wild, but again, we're still yet to find out. I've got to get the wheel back on and drive it first and hopefully not blow up another water pump if it is an oil cooler issue. So time will tell still. Right, so the only thing left to fix on this now is, weirdly, the battery tray. So you can see off camera I've put the final lot of coolant in it, I think I showed you me running it up to temperature and everything. It also needed topping up after it cooled down. To replace this, you have to get the battery out of the way, which requires undoing this clamp down here. Should be easy, right? Well, someone that's worked on it, whether it's the gearbox place or the original engine builder, has had the battery tray out to get to the gearbox mount, and when they've done this clamp back up, pretty sure they've done it with an impact, because it was like 100 Newton meters tight. So eventually broke loose, but all the threads, well, you'll see in a minute. You can see no amount of spinning that is actually loosening it up. So I ordered a new battery tray from Leader, and that came within 24 hours, which is sick actually. I was expecting not to be able to do the test drive until Monday, but I did previously just lever this out like this to get it out. You can just rag them from under the clip if the clip is not done up too tight. Mine was almost too tight to get out, but yeah, if that happens to yours, you can just brute force it out. Just be careful the car doesn't come off the jack stands. So you can see all the metal down there where that's been done up ridiculously tight at some point. Grenaded the threads out from there. Could be no one's fault, but also, like, I can't fathom why you would ever have to do a battery clamp that's official torque spec is 15 Newton meters. I can't fathom why you would ever do that up tight enough to remove metal. But apparently this is a common issue with these, so who knows. Right, the video's not over and the car's back on the ramp, as you can see. So you probably know what that means. Let me show you real quick. I don't think that, obviously, it was just bearing grease. That was wishful thinking and just something to rule out that doesn't cost anything apart from a bit of coolant. I don't know if you can see in there, but I'll throw some images up on the screen. Very grey, way worse than before I drove it. And after like half an hour idling, you can see white on the coolant cap again. So yeah, we haven't won yet. So the next thing to rule out that's not going to really cost me anything before we jump to the conclusion of head gasket failure is the stock rear oil cooler. So what I'm going to do is undo these two banjo bolts, which are double banjos, take the rear oil cooler lines off, the silver ones at the bottom, just attach these ones if I can fit them, the black ones, which go to my front mounted oil cooler, and just see if it keeps mixing oil and coolant. The theory being, with no high pressure oil going through that cooler, there'll be nothing to push oil into the coolant and it should stay clean, even if then coolant starts coming out of the oil cooler and leaking out that way, because there's no oil pressure holding it in wherever the leak is between the oil and coolant, if that makes sense. So I've still got the factory single banjos, I've bought some new copper washers. The only worry I have is that these aren't necessarily going to clear crank pulley without being spaced up by the double banjos, so we'll see if we can make those fit, and it might be that the car sits here for a couple of days while I wait for some 90-degree AN fittings just to space that out a little bit. But yeah, let's see how it goes, I guess. Crush my thumb. Ow. Again, smash my knuckles. So here are the double banjos I've just removed. Here's the state of things. So that's the factory sandwich plate, and you can see I've just bagged up the rear oil cooler lines just to keep them from dripping everywhere, and I'll tuck them out of the way so that they don't catch on anything or set fire before I drive the car. So what we're going to do now is see if we can get these to fit with our factory single banjos, flush the coolant and see if the oil comes back again. Sorry if this video is a bit repetitive in that front. I'll try and cut out as many of the coolant changes as possible, but yeah, unfortunately this has been my life for the last week. Right, so I've eyeballed it and there's no way this is going to work with the banjos. So this one's actually fine. I was more worried about this one hitting the crank pulley than anything else, and it doesn't. It would miss by a couple mil, maybe a bit close for comfort, but certainly would work, especially as a temporary measure. This one though, without having a lot more room, it's hitting the oil filter and there will be no way to get it to lie flat and seal up really. There is no way of using two banjos to go to the front of the car. Maybe if you rotate the housing, filter housing, and do some funky stuff. But what I think I'm going to do instead is I've ordered some M16 by 1.5, which is the pitch of these standard threads, to AN8, which are my oil cooler lines straight adapters. So there'll be an AN8 thread sticking out of these up to about here, then AN8 90 fittings, and these will just screw on with the blue banjos removed, so they'll sit about here, miles away from anything that they could interfere with, and that should be a really clean solution. Problem is, if the oil cooler is not the problem, I've wasted 30 quid on fittings. But yeah, I'll get back to you on Wednesday or Thursday if those arrive. Fingers crossed we can sort this thing finally, once and for all. Right, so the AN fittings arrived. We've got M16 by 1.5 to AN8 straight male-to-male adapters, and AN8 to AN8 swivel 90s. These are all from Torx. My last lot were from Advocult, but they didn't seem to have any straight metric to AN adapters on their site. So this should all be straightforward to fit. We need to remove the banjos, we need to screw these into the oil takeoff plate, and then just screw it all together basically. That is hard to get to. Hey, so here's the finished product all cleaned up. I've just put a torch on to show it better. So we've got the two 90s, two male-to-males, and into the AN8s, all nipped up as tight as I can without sort of overdoing it and stripping the threads. Just got to keep an eye on it for leaks. It took like 5 minutes plus for each of them. So fiddly with no space in there. It'd be easier with the oil filter off, honestly, but I'm hoping that's enough to fire it up and flush the coolant and see if the header tank stays clear.
This video is starting to get repetitive because, yeah, it's feeling a bit repetitive for me. It's been like 2 weeks of this.
If you're still here, I guess thanks for watching. Since filming this video, I've driven the car once. I don't have time before I go on holiday to film anything else and give you a conclusion really to the story yet. But subscribe and stay tuned for the next video where you'll see if this really did fix it and if I have to strip the inlet manifold off on my driveway to fit an oil cooler bypass, which sounds like a massive headache and not something I've ever had to do before. That'll certainly be an experience, but best guess I've got right now is the Nevlock oil cooler, the replacement factory style oil cooler, which I'm pretty sure is non-genuine, not Vauxhall. It's something they've had made or ordered from some aftermarket but OEM manufacturer. Has instantly sprung a leak the first time I've driven the car after getting it back from Ash at Giz Motorsport, so nothing to do with him. All the work he's done on the car has been brilliant and he's been really helpful via messages in trying to figure out what the hell's gone wrong with it. Unfortunately, the oil pressure getting into the cooling system, 90 psi at cold oil or hot while revving versus maybe 10 or 20 psi coolant, like it's gonna blow some seals out. The cooling system is not designed for that. So if I get back from my holidays and have a couple of nice weeks trouble-free with the car and it doesn't start mixing oil and coolant again, I mean, I'll show you some pictures now, like it seems to have stayed clear after the 40-minute round trip I've done in it. And I'll show you a before picture now of the header tank after a half-an-hour round trip. Before bypassing the oil cooler, with the oil cooler bypassed, it looks nowhere near that bad. I think the layer that I can see on the surface now is just what was left over in the cooling system after just a single flush from the mess that was already there, basically. So yeah, here's to just hoping it stays that way, I guess. If you like the video, you know what to do. Like, leave a comment, subscribe so you can see the next episode. Keep enjoying the pain this car is causing me, because I've been on the brink of selling it, honestly, or scrapping it, or setting fire to it or something. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video.